you're who taught me about oral sex.
Doing it, stick up their ass stuff. You can prostitute yourself in business, in politics, anything.
Bill Maher, this heroic, noble, multi-millionaire who he feels for the little guy, except never really. He pretends he's a liberal, and in some ways he is a liberal, but sometimes he calls that left wing, and he is the farthest thing from left wing you could ever imagine. He had on Matt Gaetz, the former congressman from Florida, who recently stepped down the moment Trump got elected because it was days before the congressional investigation was going to come out on his sexual indiscretions, thinking that would stop the investigation from coming out because apparently congressional investigations only apply if you're a congressman. Well, afterwards, there's no reason to release them. But they released it anyway. And by the way, and I'll mention this more, most of his interview with Matt Gaetz, who is a Republican, so Bill Maher claims to be a Democrat, right? Hates Donald Trump, right? They should hate each other. Instead, because they're two millionaire white male bro dudes, they love each other. This is a love fest.
Relax.
As relaxed as one can be under these conditions. I think that Congress is supposed to be temporary. I mean, I'd done it for 8 years. I'd been in elected office 6 years before that in the state legislature. So from age 26 to 42, I was an elected official.
He wants you to believe that the reason he stepped down from Congress was because he was done, because he'd done it. I finished being in Congress. He had just won re-election. And the reason he ran for the hills was because the congressional investigation into his crimes was coming out. And Donald Trump nominated him, although it quickly was reversed, but nominated him to be attorney general. And he was like, yeah, I'll take that job. And he thought that by jumping out of Congress and becoming attorney general, the investigation into who he really is wouldn't come out and he'd be fine. And unfortunately, the investigation still came out. The House Ethics Committee released a report following an investigation on his sexual misconduct. The report found substantial evidence that Gaetz violated House rules, federal and state laws, and ethical standards, including accusations of prostitution, statutory rape, drug use, accepting illegal gifts, and obstruction of Congress. Key allegations were that he engaged in sexual activity with a 17-year-old girl in 2017 using illegal drugs from 2017 to 2019, and at one point that he may have flown her into his state or another state, which is federal sex trafficking. No charges have been brought against him, so you can say, okay, well, the Congress said this, but if no charges are brought against him, it hasn't been proven. That's fair, but let's be honest. The reason this guy dropped out of Congress before he even knew whether he got the attorney general spot was because he thought it would stop the report from coming out. That is why. And he knew roughly what the report was going to say. So this whole garbage about, I just tired, man. I'd been in Congress for 8 years and I'm like 42 or something. I don't know how old he is, but it's such bullshit. These guys are such epic bullshit artists. So yeah, and of course, Bill Maher, because again, this is a love fest between two epically rich, if you look at percentage of Americans, 0.1 percenters, white males. They're in love. There's a love. It's a bromance. I thought towards the end they might start making out. And this is supposedly the polar opposite belief system of Bill Maher. But of course it's not, because both are parties. If you actually believe in them, if you actually endorse them, if you are part of the Democrat Party or the Republican Party, then you believe that essentially the same shit. And that's what you get from these clowns.
What do you think about us becoming an empire again and just annexing places? You know, I did not see that coming. And when I say I did not see that coming, I'm going to spell it for you. IDIDNAZI.
He just said, what do you think of the U.S. becoming an empire again? Becoming again, meaning we are not an empire unless Trump steals Greenland. Like, as of right now, not an empire. The U.S. does not own or manipulate or have power over a large percentage of the globe. There are not 900 military bases spanning the planet. There are not countries around the planet that we have cooed, that we have economic war against, that we have the chains of economic debt around their necks, that we manipulate in one form or another. Europe's not a vassal state underneath the United States doing whatever the hell we tell them to. No. Right now, the U.S. is not an empire. If Trump steals Greenland, the U.S. will be an empire. Like, breathtaking idiocy. Breathtaking. What do you think of the U.S. becoming an empire again? Yep, that's right. It's gonna start any minute now. U.S. gonna become an empire. Won't that be crazy? There's a slight difference, but he's not making it, of if the U.S. were to annex Greenland, if the U.S. were to say militarily we're coming and we're taking Greenland and we're making it part of the United States, that would be newish. We haven't done that in a while. But in terms of the U.S. going in and essentially taking places by putting in puppet governments, by turning areas into failed states, by claiming we own militarily certain areas of countries, like a third of Syria, which, by the way, would fit under this kind of annexation plan. But with like Iraq, where we just invade it, collapse it, put in a puppet government, the U.S. has been doing that nonstop. There was never a time we weren't doing that.
I did not see that coming, because we really shouldn't be annexing, should we? Annexing? I mean, doesn't Greenland have to actually sell it to us if they wanted to? Isn't it their choice?
I care a lot more about whether or not we're going to annex features of the Panama Canal or Greenland than, whether or not Russia annexes Crimea.
I'm glad Matt Gaetz is opposed to the proxy war in Ukraine, but that was a change of subject, of course. Because Matt Gaetz is, there's certain areas that I might agree with him on, like being opposed to a proxy war, or being opposed to at least that proxy war, and the fact that Russiagate was hilariously false. So there's certain areas I might agree with him. It doesn't change the fact that he's a leeching parasite piece of in many, many other ways. I'm sure there's a couple of things I agree with Bill Maher on. In fact, I'll name one: legalization of drugs. Bill Maher and I agree on that, but that doesn't make him not a parasitic piece of. You see how that works?
I think that you can.
But are you for it?
Huh? Annexing Greenland and parts of the Panama Canal? Sure, if it's a deal that makes sense.
But we don't own them.
Well,
so
yeah,
you're saying
it's a real estate transaction, Bill.
It's not an invasion. Is not a real estate transaction.
Well, we don't say anything about an invasion.
Well, how else do you take something?
A real estate transaction.
So they would have to agree to it.
Yeah, we could buy it.
Okay, that's different than annexing.
Well, but
so you would say, so you would agree that Denmark has to agree to it. We're not just going to take it.
The people of Greenland, I think, would be the most dispositive voice.
Okay, so we can go over the head of the government. What about?
This is remarkably stupid and disingenuous. Okay, so the people of Greenland, which is part of Denmark, he's saying you can just go to a part of Denmark and ask the people there if they're willing to sell it. But of course, they're skipping over what his plan seems to actually include, which is pressuring Denmark in a variety of ways, economically and otherwise, to being forced to sell Greenland. That is not a choice. That's not like a democratic. It's not. It's just basically putting it into such a situation that the Denmark government felt that he may collapse their country economically if they didn't sell him Greenland. That's just force. It's just force without a gun. It's just another kind of force. This is also classic Republicans to act like that. Well, I suppose a lot of liberals act like this too, that economic force doesn't exist. It's just not a real thing. Oh, really? People don't do things for, later they go on to talk about people doing things for money. So apparently they do understand that can be a thing. But they're ignoring the fact that, both of them are ignoring the fact that the United States steals resources around the world constantly. It doesn't need to normally annex the place. The only reason this is different than what we've done in the past is because Donald Trump is doing it more forthright. Donald Trump is saying on television, I want to take Greenland and make it part of the United States. That's the only difference, how forthright it is. And this is why a certain segment of the ruling class do not appreciate Donald Trump as the CEO of America, Inc. He's too obvious about things. The United States has, for decades, maybe since our inception, gone into other areas, pressured them economically, sometimes pressured them at the barrel of a gun into agreeing to certain terms. We also use lawfare to put in puppet governments. You can see this right now around the world. So the United States steals, extracts, sucks off various countries around the world, and they don't need to actually annex it. Usually they use a lot more tact than Donald Trump does. That's the only difference. And yet these two idiots act like, oh, we completely disagree on this. We are so different. Oh my God, are we different?
Term we apply across the board. It doesn't just apply to sex. You can prostitute yourself in business, in politics, anything. It means doing something you hate for money. That's what it means. It didn't sound to me like the women you were with hated it. Just put it that way.
Bill Maher seems like he's pressing Matt Gaetz on like the crimes he's accused of. But as he goes through it, you see he's largely defending him. He's really setting him up for a defense. But Bill Maher first says, oh, no, that's not anything's prostitution. You can be a prostitute in law. You can be a prostitute in business. You can prostitute yourself. Yes, that is a term of that's expression. It's an expression people use as a metaphor, but that is not legally what we're talking about here, Bill. Legally, prostitution has a far more specific definition, and he knows that. Now, here's the thing. Bill Maher and Matt Gaetz and I agree on one thing, which is prostitution should probably be legal, but far more regulated. No one exploited. No one clearly doing it against their will. You may go, oh, well, sex for money is always exploitation. Well, people join the military all day long for money. They do it for college. They do it because they are poor and they see no way out. But if they join the military, there is a way out. So people join the military all the time. That's killing people for money. Like, that's even worse. You got all that. But those are not our laws right now. So for a congressman to break the laws of prostitution is still breaking the laws. Whether we like it or not, that's how it stands right now. And Bill Maher should know all this, but instead he jumps over it like, there's prostitutes and everything. You can prostitute yourself working at that. He says the definition of prostitute is doing something you don't like for money. Well, if that were the case, Bill, if that were the case legally, then the entire American economy is illegal. Every person working as a dental hygienist, every person, a tax attorney, every person is cleaning off the bottom of your car, like every person doing 99% of jobs, it would all be illegal. Of course, that's not what we're talking about. But Bill Maher is trying to give him an out. He's laundering Matt Gaetz' image, which that's what Matt Gaetz is doing in an interview right now at all, is he's on an image laundering tour, and Bill Maher is doing him the favor of trying to make him look like the good guy. Then he concludes that with a statement like, it did not at all look like, from what I saw, that the women you were with didn't like it or didn't enjoy themselves. And I'm like, when I heard that, I was like, how the would Bill Maher know whether women with Matt Gaetz enjoyed themselves? Or what? I don't care if he read every text that was released in the investigation. How would you ever know? The only reason you would say something like that is if you were bending over backwards to try, if you're giving Matt Gaetz a reach around to try and defend what he's been accused of. It's such a pathetic. And then you have two white guys going, hey, my prostitutes like it. Hey, it's just these two are so repulsive on just so many other levels. These are two rich white men talking about how they like to women and pay for it.
Yeah, I think there's a difference between sex for money and sex and money. And if you start to blur that line, we're going to need a lot more fucking prisons in this country.
Right.
Now, but I want to make a point about what.
So he then changes the subject. But yeah, he's right. There's a big difference between sex and having sex with someone and you give them money because you're a person with money and they're not, and paying them for sex. Everything that they released about him seemed to show a pretty evident paying for sex situation, I think. But whatever.
Up with one of them, and you could be that second option.
So people want to know two basic things.
Okay.
One, was he ever with an underage girl?
No.
Okay. I know you said that, and if the Justice Department had any evidence, and again, people are going to attack me. What are you doing? Defend. I'm not defending Matt Gaetz. I'm telling the truth as to what it is. And if you don't want to hear the truth,
it's not true. He's not telling the truth because just a minute ago he said, "I think the women enjoyed it." So that's not the truth. That's just an opinion you got from reading a couple of texts. And the only reason you bring that up on your show is to defend him. So yeah, he's doing everything he can to defend Matt Gaetz, but
you're the hack. The Justice Department, this was Biden's Justice Department, declined. I can't believe Biden's Justice Department wouldn't have wanted to get you if there was something. So the fact that they said, we got nothing, tells me something, that they had nothing. Now,
it's not really true because at the end of the day, these are two, again, but we're talking about Gaetz here. This is a very rich white man who's still heavily connected within Washington, within Florida, even if he was disliked by enough Republican senators that they went forward with this investigation in Congress, and he ultimately stepped down because of it. It doesn't mean he's not politically connected. So the idea of the Justice Department doesn't want to go after a former congressman, after he steps down, that doesn't shock me. Look what they did with Epstein.
Now, I don't know what anybody does behind closed doors. There's lots of scandals about lots of people, but I got to go with that.
Criminal.
So I put that aside.
Okay.
Second thing they want to know is what he was doing considered prostitution. So that's what we're talking about now. And I couldn't agree with you more. Like the Beverly Hills housewife who really hates her husband now, but sticks around and fucks him a few times a year because she doesn't want to give up the big house. To me, that's much more prostitution. That is
intentionally misconstruing things. I agree that people prostitute themselves for not the legal term of prostitution, but the term non-legally speaking. People prostitute themselves for all kinds of reasons. And this is why I believe, one of the reasons I believe prostitution should be legal. But yeah, people prostitute themselves for money. People get married just for money. People marry assholes. They don't like it all for money. So people do things for money all the time. And of course, this is also the flaws of the capitalist system. Some of the biggest flaws of the capitalist system is people end up doing all kinds of things that they utterly despise for money. How gross, how disgusting. But of course, these two clowns are big capitalists and they would never criticize the system. Instead, they just say, oh, look at this. People are forced to do horrible things for money all day long. Let's keep that system. Let's just widen it, broaden it. It sounds wonderful because these are the winners of the exploitative system. Way more so than even people in the middle class. These are the winners of the winners.
Willing to live by those terms.
It couldn't be backed up. Okay. Also, this is in your defense. This is another thing from an article, again, in I think, Washington Post. The committee found two women, 27 and 25, who did not consider the relationships transsexual. So that's a direct quote. Again, hacks. I'm just reading what I read.
Well, a couple of things. One is it sounded like he said transsexual, which would be interesting. They found two women who did not consider the relationship transsexual. He said transactional. But when you have to write a sentence like they did find two women who did not find the sex transactional, doesn't that make you go, oh, all the other ones did find them transactional? I don't hear that and go, oh, sounds great. Like, we interviewed all of these women and found two that said they were not paid for sex. It's like, again, Bill Maher is doing everything he can to try and make this sound okay. It's so pathetic.
That would encompass a lot of people, I think.
Hey,
but where you get me wrong, man, where I took exception with you, and I was always a huge fan of yours because when I got to you used to always have Joe Scarborough on, and Joe Scarborough
just had him on.
Was my congressman.
Yeah.
I was a huge Joe Scarborough fan. We were really close, even when I was 12, 14 years old. And so I would be able to stay up late at night and watch content that otherwise would have been deemed too irreverent for me because Joe Scarborough was on.
Sure.
And then that created a permission structure for me to continue to watch your show because, Joe has been on that show. It can't be too bad for me to watch. So he was our guy for a long time.
I still like him. You guys went ape shit when he went to Mar-a-Lago 2 days after you.
I think that's great, by the way.
Yeah, of course you do, because the criticism was that he was kissing the ring. I think 2 days after the election was a little early. It did give that signal. Give it a week, Joe. Okay, but I like Joe.
Of course you do, because Joe Scarborough is another pathetic titan of media, the face of MSNBC. just manufacturing consent for war and death and destruction and exploitation and surveillance and taking away your rights and like everything MSNBC manufactures consent for. Joe Scarborough's there to do it. Of course, Bill Maher likes him. Of course, Matt Gaetz likes him. And it shows that this is one big club, folks. This is one big club of rich white men running shit and trying to make you think that they're on two sides of a goddamn debate when they are the one side. It's a class war and they're the rich. How hard is this to understand? We're in the middle of a class war in which everything has been sucked away from Americans, and yet these ass clowns want you to think that they are the two sides of the political debate in this country. Yeah, Joe Scarborough is another piece of, Joe Scarborough running down to Mar-a-Lago to kiss the ring right after Trump won. It just shows how there's no scruples in media. I mean, Joe Scarborough and Mika Brzezinski had this like brief moment where they insulted Trump too much and he got offended and stuff. But at the end of the day, they're going to run down there and say, hey, we really like you. Really? I thought he was a fascist. I thought he was evil. I thought he was using the Justice Department as a weapon. Oh, but all of a sudden, he's your buddy again. Interesting how that works. Go where the money is.
But okay, so they start out as that, but they're also conservative. Nicole Wallace was like Bush's like,
yeah. Oh, Mrs.
Sorry, or before this, they talk about conservatives on MSNBC. MSNBC has some regular faces that are like the right wingers, so they can have debates, right? That's what he's talking about.
She was out there, cheerleading the Iraq War.
Right. And the longer they're there and the more time they see MSNBC on the paycheck, the more they become not just anti-Trump, but now they're just totally in league with, and I said, look, I don't want people to become more conservative generally, but when looks to me like the paycheck is dictating your politics, I do have a problem with it.
Well, they're enslaved by their audience because they see what
everybody is,
what turns off their audience, what turns on their audience, and that becomes the thing that turns them on as well. But like even
these two assholes acting like that's not them to a T. They just describe themselves. It's just Matt Gaetz is doing it for votes or for clout in the Republican Party. Bill Maher's doing it for clicks and views. These two succeeded at their careers, at their respective careers, because they were whores to begin with. That is how they got there. That is how they made it. That is how they succeeded. And so Bill Maher's saying, I don't like how these people on MSNBC, they start off as right-wingers and then they slowly become the same as MSNBC. It's like, yeah, because they were whores to begin with. Not the derogatory term for prostitutes, but the money whores, like anything for money. That kind of terminology. Of course, they're going to turn to whatever gets them more money or more views or whatever. Whereas there are some of us that keep saying the same thing and have the same stances, despite the fact that it actually makes our careers incredibly difficult and it makes us not have viewers or not be on big channels or not be invited on the mainstream media because the U.S. empire makes it as difficult as possible to go after the U.S. empire. In fact, Bill Maher would like you to know the U.S. may one day become an empire again. Did you know that?
Even when we say conservative, liberal, right, left, we are in a time of realignment right now. I think unlike any other time you've been in the media. Who is the pro-war party? Who is the pro-free speech party?
Yeah.
Who is the pro-free trade party?
Who's the stick-up-their-ass party?
Right.
That's the biggest one in my world.
Matt Gaetz wants to, there's a lot going on here, but Matt Gaetz wants to act like the Republicans are just the pro-free speech party. No, they're not. I mean, yeah, they're against the suppression of speech that the Democrats were doing, but Donald Trump just said he was going to deport anybody who stood up against Israel's genocide. So how is that pro-free? They're not. Neither side is pro-free speech. Matt Gaetz is full of shit here. He was trying to say the Republicans are the pro-free speech party. The Republicans are the anti-war party. No, they're not. There may be some Republicans who have actually spoken out against sending more weapons to Ukraine, but I don't think there's a single Republican who stood up against sending more bombs to Israel. How is that anti-war? The Republicans are not anti-war, and neither are the Democrats. And Bill Maher says, who's the stick-up-the-ass party? Okay, the Democrats are the stick-up-their-ass party about some things. On other things, like trans story time, which clearly is destroying America, the Republicans are definitely the stick-up-their-ass. So both is the answer to everything they're saying. Both of the garbage parties are all of these things.
Because it was the moral majority doing it, stick up their ass stuff.
Yeah.
You know, Pat Robertson,
Oh,
who's the other, Jerry Falwell.
this was your
all those
thing.
purple Teletubbies, you know, are gay.
Well, the Clinton thing.
And then who became the stick up their ass people?
Yeah, the left.
The left.
Well, and I mean, you're who taught me about oral sex, because
You're welcome.
the Clinton.
You're welcome, Mrs. Gaetz.
I would like to believe that when he says you're the one who taught me about oral sex, that I assume Bill Maher and he had a consensual relationship in the past, and I think that's great. You know, I mean, honestly, I think during this interview, Bill Maher might have taught Matt Gaetz about oral sex, because he has been blowing him throughout. This has been 1 hour-long blowjob by Bill Maher on a right-wing Republican. Oh, God. These people are so grotesque.
For someone who will do that. People will watch this. If they watch the whole thing, they'll go, wow, what an honest conversation. Like, not like anyone I've ever seen with any politician. Like, that's with just two guys talking.
Nobody would watch this and say that. Nobody would say, what an honest conversation. If they do, they are dum-dums of such galactic proportions that they are, okay, probably most of America. Most of America. No. What? How? Deluded, out of touch, in your own bubble, sucking yourself off. Does Bill Maher have to be to think this comes off as an honest conversation? It comes off as honestly, intellectually dishonest. It comes off as honestly fucking full of themselves. It comes off as honestly out of touch. It comes off as honestly a lot of things, but not honestly honest. Jesus Christ, it's just two guys talking. It's two millionaire white males fluffing each other. What? So these people are so, I already said it, so pathetic, completely removed from reality. They're besties. Doesn't matter if you're apparently, if you pretend to be the furthest sides of American political discourse and you love each other. That tells you a lot about American political discourse.
When they try to extend the surveillance state at any cost, my side is wrong. When they try to go and build Jeffersonian democracies out of sand and blood and Arab militias in the Middle East and convert every Central Asian cave into.
I got to give that to Trump.
Yeah,
he really doesn't like war.
No, he really
that's not a bad thing. It's ironic. Like, who was the last president who really didn't like war? Jimmy Carter, the one they just buried. He never fired a shot. It's funny that they have that in common, isn't it?
It's funny that Donald Trump doesn't like war. If Bill Maher stopped to research anything, he would learn in roughly 3 minutes that Donald Trump had our military, or allowed our military, to drop 40,000 bombs in his first year in office last time around. 40,000. Obama's final year, he dropped 26,000. So I guess both of them are parties that support war. Donald Trump doesn't like war and yet has the Pentagon drop 40,000 bombs. Donald Trump doesn't like war and yet allowed the Pentagon in his first year to drop the mother of all bombs, the Moab, which is the largest non-nuclear bomb in existence. He allowed them to drop that in Afghanistan. Donald Trump doesn't like war, yet the war continued in Afghanistan. The invasion of Afghanistan continued throughout Trump's entire time in office. Donald Trump really doesn't like war, except the U.S. owning a third of Syria continued through Trump's entire time in office. During Trump's entire time in office, how many bombs? Remember, he dropped 40,000 his first year. How many bombs did China drop in other countries? Zero. Oh, okay. But Donald Trump is the one who really doesn't like war. He said, Bill Maher says Carter never fired a shot. And isn't it funny that he and Trump have that in common? Like, you couldn't get this much fake news pro-Trump garbage from Fox News. I don't even know if Fox News would show that, would say something that outlandish. Again, repulsive.
It is. And
two guys who have nothing else in common.
And it's not that Trump doesn't have militaristic tendencies. Like, I don't think he has any problem with torture or a really powerful, strong military. But right now, like, one of the reasons we should be anti-war is because I'm not sure we would win very many of them. And that's not a criticism of the amazing men and women in the military, but the shit we build doesn't work. I was on the Armed Services Committee.
No, I agree with it. Well, I agree with the massive waste of money that is the Pentagon. The shit we build doesn't work is, take it with a grain of salt. It's like, it depends on what you're using it for. Yes, the F-35 is a pile of garbage, but that's because it's a money laundering system. The Pentagon's a giant money laundering system, but it doesn't mean the U.S. doesn't drop bombs or ship bombs to Israel that work. I mean, they kill people, they kill children every day. But Matt Gaetz literally had to like back Bill Maher off and try and remind people that Trump is a bloodthirsty military maniac, because Matt Gaetz right there, his calculation was, because he's still trying to stay in the good graces of Trump and Trump voters, and his calculation was, ooh, it looks bad for Trump to be a peacenik. We don't want people thinking that Trump doesn't annihilate and destroy families overseas and kill kids and everything else, because that's what a lot of America's been carefully socially engineered to believe means we're winning. So I will back Bill Maher off and say, oh, no, don't worry. Trump has militaristic tendencies. He likes a strong military, which is code for $1 trillion a year dumped into this money pit. But then Matt Gaetz tried to create this nuance of like, but the stuff we're building doesn't work well, which, you know, I'm going to agree with him on the F-35 being a pile of shit, but I'd prefer it be a pile of shit. Do we really want functional U.S. empire weapons as we murder children overseas? I would really love for all of our stuff to not work. That would be the best. That would really be awesome.